What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Soccer Performance Podcast. We're back for episode 2. If you haven't checked out the first episode, go and do so right now. We dove into who we are, what we're looking to get, and what we're looking to give with this podcast. Today, we're going to jump into episode 2. I'll let Mario introduce that.
Yeah, so we spoke a little bit about how the game has evolved in Canada. It's improving. There still is, and there were more so in the past, obstacles, for players growing up. So, Juan, like when we played, can you kind of elaborate on what those were? And
yeah, I think the biggest, I would say, obstacle is the culture, right? There's for majority of Canadian history, hockey's been the dominant sport, right? So I think it's inevitable that we're behind if you're comparing it to other countries that have a football culture. But we talked about it before. It's part of that history in the country, and as more people are coming to Canada, things are changing. So when I was playing, there wasn't the structure that there is now. There wasn't the opportunities that there are now. There wasn't coaches being educated as much as there are now. And so I think anybody that was good was naturally gifted. And so you had a lot of players that had a gift that just didn't know how to channel it or didn't know how to apply it in a more professional manner. And I think that's always that. I think athletic people are always there, and it's up to the eye of somebody who knows what they're doing to see the potential in that and then to coach. I think at the end of the day, I came from a background where my dad would take me to the field and play, but most of my teammates weren't that, right? Anybody that was good from just whatever they were from natural abilities.
No, that's a good point. Kind of how you mentioned there, because the overall as a whole, Canada, the soccer culture is not there, but there is, a lot of, South American, European kind of communities where, there is a passion for soccer and there is some talent there, but I think there's, as you touched on, there's no kind of system that can kind of take their 100%. Talent and bring them to the next level and give them a guided direction. So that being said, there's more academies, more educated coaches we have now. When we played, our coaches were all, part-time and, they didn't have as much education. So that has improved a lot.
Yeah, that's a huge, for me, that was always the thing. And I have conversations going back. I'm sure, your dad was the same as my dad, and any soccer dad was always, frustrated that their son couldn't do it at this level, or, it looked as if it was, it was just easy to do without the actual, instruction of a coach. And I think that there's a lack of value given to coaches because Canada has always been around part-time coaches, right? It's not a country where they're involved in sport as much as somebody else, enough to make a living, right? And so a coach is very rare. Now, like you're saying, a lot of more private systems are in place that can afford to pay somebody. So now that creates a demand, that creates somebody wanting to go and properly educate themselves. So I think that with time is going to change. I see a lot of now young kids that have raw energy and talent and passion for the game having places to develop, right? That's kind of where I do what I do. I look at a lot of clubs now that have come across people that know the game, and like you said, with time, just like there are players evolving, there are coaches evolving. I think the biggest thing that I noticed growing up is the gap between high level football and youth development, that most young players get to the high level because they're a combination of both skilled and properly trained, but they get to that level and they're not they're not a complete package, right? They're not impacting a team at 18, 19. They usually impact a team at 22, 23. And you see a lot of European players, South American players go to a club, impact at 16, impact at 17, right? And I think that's again with time. What do you think?
Yeah, to elaborate on that, so in February I had a good opportunity. I was kind of shadowing in Dinamo Zagreb in the academy there with under 18s and got to see the system there, and they're a very reputable club, and for youth development in the world. And I had a chance to speak with one of the coaches there, and I asked him, because you know they do camps in all over the world, in America and Australia. So I asked him like kind of what was the biggest gap he saw in the system, and he said, you know, there is talent, you know, in America, Canada, but one, the coaching education, which we talked about, right? And two, the culture, right? So if you're one talented player on the pitch, but you have 10 not so talented teammates, your level drops. But if you're surrounded by 10 very gifted players, as you would be in a Dinamo Zagreb academy or another professional academy, you got to raise your game. So I think
in terms of competition.
Exactly. So that day in and day out, are you being challenged? So you have the talent, but for that talent to develop and become an impactful player, as you said, you need to be in competition with your teammates. You need to be challenged in training every day. And so guys, you know, talented guys who perhaps dominate in their league and their team here, it's great, but you know, their development will slow down. You know, they need to be challenged daily.
And it's not to be controversial or anything, but I mean, from my understanding, I think that from what I understand, again, I could be wrong. Maybe somebody can explain it better. But there's a limitation in the USA to allow players to play out of their age group, right? They're only there's a not a limitation, but it's a difficult process, right? Okay. Which in any professional academy, it's the opposite. As soon as you show readiness to go to that level, boom, go. Exactly, if you have U14, you want to play U16 because right away you're a product of your environment. If you're a 14-year-old playing in a 16-year-old, then of course you're going to be better than playing in a 14-year-old. Again, given that you're not putting that player in any sort of harm, I do understand when a player is extremely young and he's not developed like a man. And so regardless of skill level, maybe you go into a tackle that may be harmful. But again, there's professional people making those decisions. And I think at the end of the day, we're playing a sport that is competitive, but it's a sport that is safe. And I think most of those decisions to not allow players to play a year up or to look for more competitive environments is with the attempt to keep players safe. But in doing so, you're creating the harm of hindering
the development.
Exactly. So now this guy really wants to jump and play at a level where is exceeding his average level, but somebody for no reason is going, no, you know what, you got to stay in this because it's better for you. And so I think that's where culturally, a North American culture is very protective, and it ends up being beneficial for the masses, but harmful when you're trying to create a high-level footballer, in my opinion, right?
No, I completely agree. No, it makes sense, because especially when I was working at Crew, all the time, they would bring up player from U16s to the under 18s, and even the under 21s, the under 23s, they'd bring up an under 18 player who they saw was promising, and they wanted to challenge him and see what he's like playing against older players, more skillful players. So, and they were a big club on youth development as well, and often they would integrate some talented players from U18, U23 with the first team to kind of see how they train and keep up and see the gap. So that's really important for sure. But to take it a step further, so in the I didn't play at the university level. You have,
right?
Is there any differences there, or kind of anything that you think that can be built on?
Like, I'm a perfect scenario. Like, I went to York University, right? So the reputation that's there is that good players go there, high level is there. I don't know if that represents the entire university system, pool of teams, but that's definitely the culture that was there. And me as a player, you realize that you get into these environments where exactly the same thing. They saw a natural talent, or they saw technical ability that they could then coach, right? And that's usually what I see in most players that come. Aside from the players that are coming from, overseas, or players that have been in national team programs and stuff like that. Obviously, York is very well connected in the GTA, and so it attracts a lot of good players, right? From all over the place.
Historically, they've 100%. Always been the best in the
So then now you look at it. how many young players are going into that system and impacting? And it's not many, right? And then you look at, okay, well, why not? Right? And it goes back into the preparation, right? So now a player needs to be under proper coaching instruction for 2-3 seasons to then make an impact, right? And so myself is an example. Then as a player, now you're frustrated. Okay, I'm not playing. I'm not doing this. But you see it like, oh, they don't see that I'm at this level. But you're this whole your whole life you've been playing in a subpar level, right? So now you get into this competitive level with men. I'm 18. Here I am against a 23-year-old man, and I'm not ready. I'm not prepared. So now if I had been exposed
to that earlier,
exactly. Even if I'm not saying that I had to
even
been
sporadically,
exactly, not to a 23-year-old, but as a 14-year-old to an 18-year-old, to a 16-year-old, something that's not far-fetched, right? That's still within proportion, but that's challenging. And you see that, and I think the lack of challenge. That me not playing led my game started to drop because I've never been in that adverse situation. I've never been in a situation where I'm not a starter or I'm not, you know what I mean? And so now I get into these moments where I'm not who I think I am. And then it's like a reality check and it's like, well, I guess this isn't for me, right? And so it leads into poor training habits, blah, blah, blah. But that's my point. If I'm able to bring a 14-year-old who is the talk of the town and put him in a 16-year-old, show him some things that it's like, holy crap, I got to humble myself because these guys are good too. Now that motivates that player. And if that player is not motivated by that, then mentally and culturally that player doesn't have the mindset to play at a high level.
So for you, so there was, trying to play at that level, play with those players, they're playing faster, so there's a bit of a technical gap, but you were always a good technical player. Did you find that perhaps there was a physical gap as well that could have helped you close that gap for that playing time as well? Or
and I'll hit it from my personal experience. The physical gap, I think, comes from I had an injury at my ACL. I tore my ACL in a summer league, right, playing with the university groups, but I tore my ACL and that's kind of where I tie that point in, where it's not even necessarily as a performance enhancer, right? As a simple injury preventative, routine, I'll call it. We were talking about that, my ACL injury. So speaking regarding, physical side of the game, Mario, I think, is trying to lead the conversation into that physical gap. And I think I realize the value in it, not just from a performance enhancement, but from a longevity. How much can you play? If I'm able to add a routine that improves my durability, my ability to last, then I think it's inevitable. And I think there's a huge lack of that. There's extremely talented players, and I even see it now that I'm in the opportunity that I'm at, where I'm working with professionals or I'm working with amateur level players, and great footballers, for the most part, great naturally talented footballers, poorly moving human beings, right? Deficient moving human beings, things that are likely to cause injury. And I think if you can understand that from a young age, you're just improving and increasing the longevity of your career at whatever level you choose to.
I agree.
Right?
So, for example, we spoke about this a little bit last episode, but in the academy setting, they have that physical development curriculum, with long-term athletic development in mind, right? So that's kind of to supplement the on-pitch work. So the under-14s would have worked on these things, 15s, 16s, and then when it's the under-18 time, now it's time. Okay, they're integrating with first team, they're integrating with under-23s, trying to expose them to that, as we've said, but also they want to get them to catch up physically. So there's a lot of research to compare. They've done this research in the UK where the gap between the 18s and the first team. So one of them, a lot more
mass,
high speed, muscle mass for sure, and the physicality, right? So that's something that we can, improve in the gym, right? So imagine, right, you're going to play with a few guys a year older, perhaps the gym program could help with that, not only in injury prevention, but at least now you can, put up a better fight on the pitch, but at the same time, they're professionals are accumulating way higher distances, more change of directions, and that's likely due to more intense play, right? So the game is faster. There's a lot more back and forth, way more transitions, counterattacking, and so players have to be fitter. So they have to be fitter, they have to be stronger. So if you're an under 18 and you haven't been exposed to playing with older players and at higher tempos, higher intensities, and you haven't been trying to close gaps in the gym with your own physicality, well, you're going to have a much tougher time being integrated.
I've noticed that usually, for example, you'll have a very talented player. Let's say he's 16, 17, and then they'll go through like a crazy transformation, right? Like Alphonso Davies at Bayern, and I'm sure you can think of other scenarios.
But he is an example of he is physically gifted and technically gifted, right? So, but
you look at where I'm going is there's a lot of players that, for instance, let's say it's, I get to 18 and I realize I don't have the muscle mass. I don't have the strength. Those things are not, those things don't come overnight. So now you have to pretty much start from scratch. When if you would have had a foundational program, just a basic routine, now you have that mass, you have that strength. It's a matter of how do I apply it, right? How do I train to be efficient? But I'm not here building muscle. I'm not here, building these movement habits. And that's where I think we're far away from the whole resistance training causing height to be an issue. I think done under proper instruction, everybody should be under a resistance training program. Every human being, right? It's just the idea of, again, good health first. Whatever you want to do with that good, healthy body is up to you. But a lot of players are again, very focused on one thing. And usually that's what they like. You'll get the opposite side where it's, I love the gym, I love the gym. And then you start to, and those players have a specific stereotype. Usually they're poor on the ball, but they're extremely fast, or maybe they're
cover a lot
strong.
of ground, cover a lot of distance, but
it's a balance, right?
But yeah, that being said, right, the gym, that stuff is supplementary to the pitch, is what we're saying, right? It can help close those gaps. I guess, so now we're in we have 3 professional academies in Canada where, there's paid, physical development staff and all that stuff. But now we're starting to see slowly clubs, these OPDL clubs, they're starting to kind of integrate that kind of curriculum and trying to hire people or work with gyms such as yours to do that. When I was growing up, every season was different. One off season we went to this gym, did whatever training. Next off season we went there and we did spin classes. There was no consistency. There was no long-term athletic development in mind. It was just fitness, and we're just doing random fitness. And that, it's good exercise, but it's not going to help with performance at all. So that's what it was. If I knew at least half of what I knew now to kind of do on my own, or if I at least had an educated coach to kind of help our team. And so when I was U14, 15, 16, I probably would have prevented my hamstring injuries. I probably would have been faster. I probably would have been way fitter, and I could have probably impacted more in the game. Because for me, I always had some sort of these physical issues coming up, and that's kind of what led me down to my career to figure all this stuff out. But for you, I don't know what that was like for you, but with your teams, what the physical training was like. Yeah,
and like you said it. So now, for instance, it goes back to structure, right? And we talked about that in that first episode. It goes back to creating structure. A professional team has structure from the bottom up. So the strength coach is connected with the technical coach and the video analysis coach, and everybody meets, everybody plans together, and then everybody has a role. So the closest thing that you can do as an academy coach or as a youth coach is to, I guess, subcontract, right? Is to team up, is to partner with people that, specialize in those things. And then, again, realistically, it's about trust. Because I don't know if it's about credentials. I don't know if it's about experience. It's different. I see a lot of great coaches that are very credible in terms of their schooling, but maybe due to a lack of just, I don't know, maybe experience, they're not as effective as another coach who's been in the game and maybe doesn't have as much knowledge, right? But I think that at the end of the day, for example, like myself and the relationship I have with Milton, they're trusting me to improve their players in a field where I'm an expert in, right? And improve their players in a way where they can't. And I think that's just a lot about their beliefs and their personality and their structure as a club, because I think there's a lot of ego in the culture here, and there's a lot of, you know, that sense of like ownership to a player. Like, this player is my player, so he can't train at so and so's place. This player is mine, so he can't go here. And I think when you realize that it's about creating something for the culture, then that player, if you do a good job, will come back to you, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about owning a player. It's about creating a system that doesn't depend on players, that doesn't depend on anything other than just good people involved that keep it flowing. I look at Milton. You know, we talked about that pay-to-play system. Most players, it's inevitable in Canada that you're going to have to pay. But if you're going to pay that money, then look at where your money's going. Like, what is that club affiliated with or to? Where is who are my coaches? What kind of culture is in this club? And I think that's the only way to be proactive about your game as a player and kind of move forward in football here. Right.
Yeah, and touch on that. I think you give some good advice. Looking more detail in the club, you know, how are they investing the money in the team?
Yeah.
You know, are they bringing in professionals to help with the development? Are they just going to some random facilities and doing random fitness training? You know, are they bringing experts on board? Because another thing, you know, I'm not going to mention club names, but in the past, maybe still to this day, you know, they'll bring someone in for fitness on pitch, but they'll, you know, in 1 hour they give you 4 or 5 teams. What are you going to do? Yeah. I mean, that's just amateur, and it's just unorganized, and it's nonsense. Well, you know, what is one coach going to do with 4 teams? Yeah. Each team should have their own dedicated session.
And not just that, like, that's why I even split, like, again, maybe we'll go into a different episode in the details of how I run what I do, but my whole strategy and my whole structure is for small groups, because it's about attention, it's about detail.
Quality, yeah, exactly. Quality.
That's
more
it.
Than quantity, right?
100%.
So you can have so for example, I always say this, you know, because when I worked in China, everything was about quantity. And I would say, give me an hour and a half with this team a day.
Yeah.
I'll take them way farther than that guy with a full day
100%.
Every day, right?
And it's how you spend your time.
It's all about how
right?
you know, taking out fluff, taking out stuff,
100%.
hammering the basics and progressing over time is going to lead to more value. And plus they'll have more energy for other stuff, more technical work and stuff
People
like that.
here, and it's funny that you mentioned that. I just think that it's how you spend the time. Like, I train an hour. I don't train an hour and a half. I don't, maybe with my pro guys, the guys that have the physical stamina to last a proper hour and a half session.
But your attention span too, right? It's not just the physical component, right? Your mental capacity to play at a high tempo, you know, that'll diminish as time goes on.
Exactly.
Your attention span, right? Losing focus.
Exactly.
And then getting tired. So let's say you're getting tired, you're not unable to play at a high tempo because you train the way you play. And if your training sessions are long and drawn out, naturally as a human, you're going to pace yourself.
Or it's a marathon type of mentality.
Yeah. However, if you have a short session and you know it's, okay, we're doing this, and this, you're going to go all out and you train like that consistently, you go in the match, you're playing at that tempo.
Yeah.
And now with the competition and the physical arousal from the game and the excitement of the game, well, you know, players generally, right, with the ball there, they're going to cover more ground. You know,
100%.
That's an energy boost in itself. But to close off, based on things we've talked about, kind of, you know, what advice would you give to players who may be watching that, you know, they're playing at a club that maybe it's not OPDL, maybe, you know, maybe the club doesn't have a partnership with Athlete Lab or something like that. You know, what should those players do to up their game?
And you said it, like, it's not even about the club structure. You know, you might have an OPDL club, and again, I don't know clubs personally to that level, right? So I'm not speaking about anybody in specific, just speaking in general. At the end of the day, you have to be very self-aware at what strengths and weaknesses are in your club. And if you're happy with what you're getting at your club, great, right? If you're content, everything's there, fantastic. But if you're not, you can't settle, right? You can't settle for just saying, well, unfortunately my club has a poor strength and conditioning program. Well, then leave your club, If it's that bad, right? If it's that impactful, or usually the case, go find a better strength and conditioning program. If it's a technical issue, if it's that bad, leave your club. If not, go find somebody who works on your technical abilities. And that's usually the case.
That
it's
extra
not easy.
work, taking initiative, working.
Cut it.
Could have closed off.
I know, but I'll close it off and I'll tell them.
Easy.